I just finished recording the episode that you are about to hear on Big Goal Energy, and I gotta tell you right now, I am on fire. The conversation you are about to listen to is between me and 3 fellow entrepreneurs who are all a little neuro-spicy. All of us definitely have ADHD, maybe different types of ADHD, but what's so interesting is the commonalities and the challenges that each of us have faced in business and trying to be successful in business, whether that was in a corporate arena or now as entrepreneurs, and the different ways that we have found to cope with it, to work with our brains rather than against our brains, and to really truly turn our neurodiversity into our biggest superpower. Whether you are neurodiverse or not, if you identify with it or not, I really encourage you to listen to the wisdom in this episode. I walked away with so many insights around how my brain works and the things that I do in my business to try to conform myself to make my brain work a different way, when in actuality, what I could do is just alter my techniques, alter my habits, alter how I show up in my business to fit my brain, which I hate to be a little biased, but I think that that is the correct pathway. I'm very excited for you to listen to this episode. I hope that you get a lot out of it. At the end, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know what was the most impactful. And also don't forget to connect with the other 3 incredible speakers that joined me on this panel. I'll give you a little insight. The 3 of us actually stayed on the call 20 minutes longer because we were just so engaged and excited about the other people on this episode. I hope you pick up on that energy. I hope you get value out of it. And I'm just so excited for you to be joining us here on this episode of Big Goal Energy. I can tell you've got big goal energy. Are you ready to turn your wildest dreams into your everyday reality? You are in the right place. Welcome to Big Goal Energy, the podcast that helps you turn your audacious and delusional dreams into your everyday life. We know that you don't settle for the ordinary, that you have dreams which others may deem unrealistic. But here, we help you defy reality and bring those dreams to life. Each episode of Big Goal Energy empowers you with knowledge, inspiration, and mentorship to conquer your most unrealistic goals. From transparent roundtable conversations to short-form episodes, you'll hear the experiences of women who have defied reality, as well as learn practical tips and strategies to fuel your journey. Join us by subscribing to Big Goal Energy, and together we'll turn your audacious dreams into remarkable achievements. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Big Goal Energy. I have been looking forward to today's episode so hard. I can't even tell you. First of all, I know I've met all 3 of these women individually, amazing women, but also this topic is really resonant to my life right now because I always just assumed that I was me, normal, whatever me, and at 40 started realizing that I am not neurotypical. People think I am. I am not neurotypical. This year has been a lot of learning for me around how does my brain actually work. In speaking with so many of my female colleagues, the way that we operate and the way that we've built our businesses is so far from what's quote unquote normal. I really wanted to have this conversation. I mean, kind of selfishly, not gonna lie, for myself, but also entrepreneur I feel like I'm working with right now. I'm like, oh, you're also not neurotypical. So how are we all setting ourselves up for success rather than forcing ourselves to conform, which I feel like was the story for so long. So let's dive right in. I would love for each of the 3 of you to introduce yourself. What's your name? What's your business? And then what do you feel like was the first indicator that really showed you that maybe your brain doesn't operate the way that everyone else's brain does and that the typical approach to business is not going to work for you? Courtney, why don't you kick us off?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Brie. I've been super excited to have this conversation as well. You're a lovely group of ladies to sit and have a chat about like a super important topic to all of us. So I'm Courtney Sander. I run Expert Generalist. I work alongside entrepreneurs who are overwhelmed by their success. That being said, a lot of them are women and neurodivergent. And so it's a group that I'm passionate about serving, as that's how I identify myself. So it's a great, I'm really happy to be here.
What do you feel like was the first thing for you that indicated maybe the typical way of doing business was not a good fit?
I really felt like for me, it was that my resourcefulness, which has kind of always been rewarded going through college and school and whatnot, was all of a sudden being penalized because I was thinking differently and having different ideas. I didn't want to do things the same way that people had always done them. And I was having new ideas that were getting shut down. And so I like to joke that I put up with that for a little bit and then I'd pack up my generic office plant and move on to the next place. It only took me a decade or so before I made my journey out.
Thank you. Eden, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Eden Jackson with Elevated Empowerment. Your question, when did I realize that regular businesses didn't work for me? When I put a screensaver of Channing Tatum on my work computer and I was fired. They were like, no, this is inappropriate. I was like, what is wrong with y'all? Like, if a shirtless Channing Tatum doesn't do it for you, this company is not going to work for me. When I couldn't just be myself wholeheartedly, I was like, no. I always joke that if anybody's going to pimp me out, it's going to be me. I mean that. The word prostitution comes from the Latin word to make for sale. So I thought if I'm going to sell my resources, my time, you really got to tickle my fancy if I'm going to do it. I'm super grateful to be here. I've been super excited and nervous. I'm like, all right, I want to hear what they have to say. Because Courtney had mentioned earlier when she realized that other people's brains aren't working the same and what they find difficult, she finds easy. I thought, oh, I see things from a different point of view. So it's been really beneficial to just have an additional eye. My ADHD is my superpower and kryptonite at the exact same time.
Oh, Diann and I have had so many conversations about that. So many conversations. So let's let Diann introduce herself, and then I want to dive into all of that. Diann, go for it.
Super excited to be here as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful group. I'm Diann Wingert. I work with neurodivergent entrepreneurs, most of whom identify as female. I have a long career as a former psychotherapist. I've passed on my ADHD genes to all three of my children and actually have one in each subtype. That is some powerful shit, let me just say. And I'm also the host of the newly rebranded ADHD-ish podcast.
Ooh.
Wow.
So how I realized I was really not meant to work for others is because I would change jobs every 2 to 3 years. Once I reached the point where I felt like, okay, I've mastered this. I know how to do this. I don't want to do it anymore because now I know how to do it. Give me something else to do. I noticed that other people tend to pick and stick. They pick a course, they stick with it, they stay with it. Maybe they get bored, but that's not enough of a reason for them to do something else. For me, boredom is a life-threatening condition. I have a low threshold and a low tolerance. So I was constantly changing careers. I've changed jobs, I've changed careers. I've had 4 careers, 3 marriages, 2 religions. And I was really ashamed of that for a really long time until I realized some of us have a different path. Some of us are on the path of continuous personal evolution. And when I was able to embrace that, I realized I need to help other people do the same thing because there's enough masking, hiding, and dimming our light. And that is all toxic as fuck.
Yeah.
Real shit. And that's on period.
Every time I hear some new something about ADHD or whatever, what you just said, I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that was a symptom. So like
Yes,
for me,
so.
like I said, I really just realized this year, 2024. I've just realized this. And more I look back though, I'm like, oh shit, what I was doing in kindergarten, that thing that the teacher told me was wrong, those were all signs and symptoms. Let me back up a second. For anyone listening to this that has not yet met me, I am Bree Seeley. I happen to be the hostess of Big Goal Energy, so I forget to introduce myself sometimes. I forget that there are people that don't know me in the world. So hello, welcome. I work with really ambitious female entrepreneurs who, as it turns out, a lot of them are also very neuro-spicy. Some of the things that have alerted me this year is complete back and forth of being absolutely, totally, fully unable to focus or focused and so deep into my focus that literally nothing else exists. Diann and I were just talking about my patterns with my morning routine are such an indication for me that my brain doesn't work the way other people's brain works. And actually, Diann talks about how ADHD, and Eden said this too, is actually our superpowers. The way my brain works in terms of business strategy and seeing all of the puzzle pieces of business and being able to put them together is absolutely part of my ADHD and my exceptionalities. It's been a learning process for me, but it makes so much sense. I'll share quickly the thing that my kindergarten teacher hated me for was we were learning how to write, put our pieces of paper square with the table. I don't write square. I take my stuff and I turn it and I write kind of sideways like this. And she would come over and she would square my paper again. She actually had like a meeting with my mom about how I wouldn't follow the rules because I wouldn't keep my paper square. And she actually taped my paper to the table to prevent me from turning my paper and writing this way. Lots of indications over my childhood that this was my experience. And I'm sure you guys can all relate with this. ADHD in little girls, especially back in, I was in grade school in the 80s, was grossly undiagnosed. Unless you were a little boy who was causing problems in the classroom, that was not a thing that you had or did.
I remember you telling me that story. And as I'm sitting here, I looked at my notebook, and my notebook is turned sideways, and I thought of you. You should be able to write however you want. Whatever works, 6 one way, half a dozen another.
Guess what? All of us got negative feedback in childhood because, let's face it, as much as we like to say, oh, we just want every child to be their best. No, we don't. We want them to sit down, shut up, follow the rules, not draw attention to themselves, and keep their hands to themselves. And if you've got a lot going on with you, whether it's physical, mental, verbal, or all of the above, that's a really tough assignment. And teachers are supposed to encourage children to want to learn. The smartest kid in the class, the one whose hand is always leaping up into the air, the one who's answering the teacher's question before she's finished asking it, you would think the teacher would be like, damn, this kid's really bright. She's really eager. I need to stimulate and challenge her more. They tell you, put your damn hand down. Put your hand down. And it's like, so I guess it's not a good thing to be bright and eager. Duly noted.
What other experiences have y'all had around having ADHD? Like either positive experiences or negative experiences just out in the world?
I think for me, it was just about the highs and lows that I would experience. Like as high as I would go, I would rebound and go as low as possible. And I think that was really what set me off on actually seeking out a diagnosis and figuring out who I really am, because it was unmanageable and I didn't like anyone on the days that I was super down. And it was just not a kind place for me to be myself. It really was transformative when I learned to kind of better understand that I didn't really have the ability at the time to really regulate that, and working for years to figure out how to do that. Do I still experience that rebound? Yeah, sometimes, but just being able to work through that and stay myself and just be aware that it was going to happen. I didn't beat myself up over it all the time. So that was how I ended up here.
I want to add to that. I do agree on the highs and the lows, and my highs are very high. I tell people my pleasant is very pleasant, but my unpleasant is just as unpleasant. I acknowledge I'm very self-aware. I think that was one of the best things I could ever do was, one of my favorite shirts is my Dolly Parton. It says, figure out who you are and do it on purpose. Learning my strengths and my weaknesses so that I can be aware of both. Because what I didn't want to let happen was let my weaknesses overpower when I am emotionally compromised. Being aware and then giving myself lots and lots of grace and not being so upset that, oh my God, how dare you not be able to do 1,000 things at one time? What is wrong with you? You should be able to do this. And that's nonsensical. So when I was able to, all right, let's check yourself. Writing lists makes life way easier so that I'm not so upset that how dare you not get these 37 things done and then not give myself credit for these 54 that I've done. Lots of grace. And my thing is I changed the photo on my screen to a picture of baby Eden so that whenever I get to getting hard, no, you do not speak to her like this. She deserves you to love her and be patient with her. And she's doing the very best she can. Watch the way you speak to yourself internally and externally has been a tremendous help when I do have those bad days that do exist.
I think you mentioned like checklists of how you accomplish things and get things done. Checklists get a bad rap. I think in the typical world out there, having to use a checklist to do something is like shame on you for not being able to keep everything straight and know what to do at every exact moment. But people forget that pilots use checklists. Surgeons use checklists. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, you want your pilot and your surgeon to use a checklist. So why can't I use one to just go through my day and remember the 6 errands that I'm supposed to go on and still forget one thing because I think I've checked it off? Like, that's okay. It still happens, but at least you're managing it. Do what works best for you.
For me, it was realizing that how I appeared to other people was very different than how I appeared to myself. I have a really high need for stimulation, a lot of it all the time. I needed to constantly be busy. And I remember a very, very strong memory of being in grad school at UCLA, sitting there listening to a lecture, just taking it all in, fascinated, taking notes on the lecture while simultaneously highlighting an article for another class and balancing my checkbook. And the people around me were just like, stop, for the love of God. And I'm thinking, am I talking to myself? Did I fart? Like, I had no idea what they were referring to. And they were like, can you just not sit still and do one thing? And it's like, that's an excellent question. I've never asked myself, but no, absolutely not. It's just that I was doing what was normal for me and not realizing what that was signaling to everyone around me was actually alarming and disturbing and deeply concerning for them. I felt this wave of shame that I'm sure you are all familiar with because I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. And now I realize I wasn't, but it was a wake-up call.
Each of us obviously are business owners. What was it that made entrepreneurship so enticing to you because of your brain and how your brain works?
I don't like being told what to do, Bree.
That's it.
Even when I need it, even when I freaking desperately need it, I like to figure things out myself. I don't like to follow the prescribed path. In fact, I've put together a ton of IKEA furniture after a divorce and I refuse to use the instructions. I just look at it and figure it out myself. I realize you are a problem for other people. I was called flippant. I was told I'm not a good team player. And it's all because I need to do things my way. And I'm willing to accept full responsibility. I will fall on my own sword. I do not mind being where the buck starts and stops because it's my buck. But it took me a lot of years to realize, oh, you're not a freak. You're not oppositional. You're not a team player. You're a fucking entrepreneur. You don't want a boss. You're the boss.
Right.
I love getting to pick the people that I work with. I think that's my favorite part. People who value you as a person, people who value your services. And when you have that sense of mutual respect, it's amazing what you can accomplish. That to me is one of my favorite parts of my day. But I also don't like being told what to do or how to do it.
That seems like a commonality. Eden's nodding too, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Yep.
But I really need somebody to tell me what to do. If I'm being honest, like I need somebody to say, Eden, I need you to get your shit together. I need you to do this and I need you to do this. But what I've learned though is if you make it my idea, oh, okay. I can do it. Don't tell me what to do. Make it like a suggestion. And then I'll be like, oh, there's that, what is it? Oppositional defiance. The moment you tell me, nope. My big thing is about sexual empowerment. And we're talking about if my honey approaches me to have sex, it's a much better idea if it's mine. If I start it, it makes you more willing to want to do that instead of, hey, we're going to do this. No, we're not. If I say it makes it different. So it's one of the things we were talking about was the approach around it. I know there's a fancier word to describe this oppositional defiance, but I think that's all I can come up with right now. I don't like to be told what to do.
For me, it was that I really wanted control over my own schedule and my reality. I mean, I think that it's kind of related to the not wanting to be told what to do. I remember, so I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor for 8 years. And the first company I was with, we were on the billable hour. I figured out a way to standardize and processize everything that happened in my day so that I could bill 10 hours, but do it in 6. I would want to work for 6 hours and be there for 6 hours and then leave. And my employers told me one day I had to be in the office for 10 hours if I was billing 10 hours. And I was like, go fuck yourselves. Like, so I found a new company to work for that was 3 hours from me and I wasn't required to go into the office. They got sold, got acquired by another company. They emailed me out of the blue one day and said, hey, you're only working 10 hours a week. So you have 2 options. We're either cutting your pay in half, your hourly rate is getting cut in half, or you can come back and work full time for us again. And I was like, no, neither.
Why should I be penalized because I'm doing a great job?
Neither of those things are an option I want. And so I filed for unemployment and decided to go full-time entrepreneurship. And that was 10 years ago. And I've never looked back. Once each of you gave yourself permission to honor who you are, what you need, how you work, what is the difference in your realities between before giving yourself that honoring of permission to be who you are and how you work and now?
It's less stress and more stress all at the same time.
Tell us more.
all the benefits that I think everything that we shared resonates with all of us. And getting away from all of that bureaucracy and things that don't make sense. And that was great. That relieved a lot of stress. That meant that I didn't have to feel guilty about going run an errand or having a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day. But then it puts the pressure on you in different ways, because that means you're the one having to hustle and sell and do all of the things, or finding the right person to do those things for you. At the end of the day, like, I choose those stressors over what corporate gave you.
It's about being in control and having the decision. One of my good friends told me that discipline is intentionally choosing the consequences, the positives and the negatives. And when I reframed it and thought of it that way, instead of discipline just being negative consequences, it drastically helped. And then my brain just squirreled and I lost where I was going.
I'll pick up the thread. No, and I'm just glad it wasn't me first. And I thank you for that.
I really figured it would be me. It's fine.
You're so generous that way, Eden. I love it.
Yeah, I got you. I took one for the team.
You sure did. For me, it's that my biggest struggle has always been, I know I'm going to outgrow absolutely everything. It's just a matter of how long it takes. Sometimes it's a very quick turnaround. And there have been many things I've been able to stay with for many years, but I'm willing to accept the responsibility, the uncertainty, the fear, the doubt, the ups and downs, because I know it's my business. I can continue to allow it to evolve as I do. That's everything for me.
Yep.
Knowing that when you have a role for someone else, you have a job description, you have job duties, you have your place in the org chart. And I went all the way to the top of the heap. I was clinical director of a huge mental health agency, and I still couldn't determine when I came to work and when I went home. Knowing that as I continue to evolve, and I will do so as long as I take breath, it's in our nature, that I can continue to craft the business to my developing self. People talk about freedom. Starting your own business is freedom. Most of us work more than we ever did for other people on our own. But the freedom is that we get to do it on our terms with the people that we want to work with, charging the fees that we want, changing it up, experimenting, doing more of this, less of that, starting and stopping things at will. That's freedom for me. And I place such a high value on that, and realizing how intimately connected that is to my ADHD. Did you remember now, Eden?
I remember I knew that working for somebody else wasn't going to work when, like I said, I couldn't be myself. And when COVID had happened and they sent the kids home during spring break after when they canceled school, my grandma was going through cancer treatments and I needed to take her to the doctor quite often. And it's not realistic to take off work as often as I needed to. And so I'm really grateful that I had the ability to be an entrepreneur and make things work my way that benefited my family. Because again, like I said, it is about the freedom. Yeah, you do work more than you did before. But again, I have the ability to choose what I will and will not do.
I think you're hitting on, as well as Bree, is like, Bree, you talked about just like you built all these systems that you were like so much more efficient in what you're doing. That's so valuable, because instead of butt in seat time, get your job done and move on with life. I love moving away from hourly rates into flat rates, because you're incentivized to do your job better and get more done and add more value to your clients. And they're paying for your value, instead of how many hours a day are you tying me to the desk and my computer to do something. That's not healthy for anyone.
As someone who has ADHD, the way my brain works is that I am strategizing for clients. I've gotten some of the best ideas for my clients in the shower, as I'm waking up in the morning, as I'm journaling, as I'm driving, as I'm in meditation. The way my brain works is that when it's a little bit quiet, it's way more receptive. If I'm face to face with a client and I'm having to come up with all the ideas, then it's just not how it works. A coach of mine described this to me one day, and she said it in terms of like men versus women, but I believe it's kind of more like neurotypical versus neuro-spicy, and that neurotypical people operate a lot in apartment complexes. So they have different boxes and containers for all these different areas and elements of their life, and they step into the family container and that's where their focus is in that moment. But that we operate more like spaghetti bowls, and good luck distinguishing that noodle from that noodle from that noodle from that noodle, because they're just all up in there together, right?
Yes.
in charging, like you were said, Courtney, hourly is a completely erroneous way of charging because my brain is working for my clients all the time.
All the time.
And if I actually charged them for the amount of time that I put in to I am thinking about my clients often, a lot on my hours off. What's really so important, this values-based pricing conversation is super important, especially for those of us that are neuro-spicy.
I've actually heard of somebody who charged their client every time they were thinking about them. Like if they were in traffic, they would charge them.
Wow.
Yeah, charged for thinking.
That's too much monitoring.
Right?
Yeah. As
Can't be
someone who's
bothered.
been on the billable hour, I had to account for every 6 minutes of my day. It is a pain in the ass. This is what I standardized in that business, was that most of the things I was doing every day were the same. You had to write a case note about every single action you took. Well, I developed up a document with all of the standard case notes that I was writing every single time. So instead of writing a case note from scratch, I had a document where I would copy and paste the case note, fill in any of the necessary details that I needed to. But like, that's how I standardized it because the billable hour fucking sucks.
But guess what? Can we talk about the other? You mentioned hyperfocus earlier, and we've been highlighting how, because we have our fast brains, we're good at pattern recognition. I always say I can connect more dots and I just make a lot more dots, but we can do some things really, really, really fast, much faster than the other people in our role. And they don't want to pay us for the whole hour because it only took us 5 minutes. But the reason why that's so important is that we have the opportunity to do that is because there are other times that we want to hyper focus, or we want to go down the rabbit hole, or we want to say what we're doing is research when it's pure obsession and indulgence. And being able to do things quickly that we can do quickly allows the space for that stuff, because that is like the biggest dopamine payday ever, to just obsess about something for way more time than you actually need to, because it's freaking satisfying and you know you could do it quicker, but you don't have to because you're the boss. Am I the only one?
Nope.
Okay. I rest my case.
Pardon this quick interruption. One of the biggest challenges ambitious entrepreneurs face is closing the gap between where they are and their big, big goal. I've created a resource for you that will help you navigate the journey more easily. Defy Reality, the female entrepreneur's guide to achieving her audaciously ambitious goals, will guide you through a process to 110% claim the inevitability of your big delusional goal, banish your doubts, and identify the exact steps you need to take to defy reality. Visit breesealy.com/free to get immediate access to this tool that will help you stop wasting your time so you can start defying reality. And now, back to your episode. I think a lot about bowling. This is on topic, I promise. You know when you're bowling and you throw the ball and it hits the gutter and then it just goes down and you don't hit any. So I think a lot about bumper bowling, actually, if we're going to be more specific, and how can I put in bumpers into my life to help me so that my ball's not going into the gutter all the time. What do you feel like are some effective bumpers that you have installed into your day or your business to ensure that you're hitting those pins and not falling into the gutter of those dopamine hit rabbit holes all the time?
I have a sign. I used to just repeat the saying to myself, but it's don't get on the red line. I went to St. Louis one time and I stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. If you've never stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, I suggest you do it one time. However, it'll ruin your whole life because now every other hotel is for peasants and no thank you. But as we get to the hotel, everybody's super friendly to us. We're telling the guy we want to go to see the arch. And he said, all right, here's how you get there. Don't get on the red line though. And I was like, cool, I won't. He said, like, don't pass go, don't collect $200, don't get on the red line. Bet I won't do it. We go down there, we're standing up on the platform, we're waiting for the train to come, and it goes off, something red line. And I was like, remember, we're not getting on the red line because the guy at the hotel said, don't get on the red line. Cool. So we're waiting, train comes, we get on, and we're sitting there, and it says, something red line. And I was like, dude, we had one job. Don't get on the red line. And yet here we are. So the red line took us to the very ghetto in St. Louis. There was like a police station and some crackheads. And I was like, Shit.
Now we know.
This is why we don't get on the red line, because when you get on the red line, then you end up in a bad place you're not supposed to be. So I tried this one day. Let's just keep repeating it to ourselves. I said it like 1,000 times. So finally I just wrote it on a card, don't get on the red line. And I had it setting on my thing because we have to stay on track. Because if we get on that red line, we're not going to get to our destination and get done what we do, which is why I like to utilize the red line. I try to do what worked today and what didn't work. I have a survival kit in my note. This is what you have to do, like you were mentioning, your morning routine. If my morning routine is jacked up, I'm done. If I wake up late and I don't have my chance to meditate and take a moment to figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life, the rest of the day will not flow as nicely if I don't listen to all of my things. Yeah, I have this checklist to keep myself from being crazy as hell. Clearly, you can't be trusted though, friend. I got to keep to this. That's why it's called my survival kit. Because if I don't, we're scrolling all day long.
I have a fuck ton to say about this because this is a huge part of what I help my clients with, but I'm going to stick to one specific thing. I believe, because everyone on this call, many people who are listening, have been culturally conditioned as women. We have been taught from a very early age to say yes. Just say yes. Anybody asks you for something, they ask you to do something, they want you to volunteer for something, take on an extra assignment, whatever it is. And we are taught from a very early age that yes is always, always, always the right answer. So it's like very much part of our unconscious programming. You as a woman with ADHD, as a self-employed woman with ADHD, as an entrepreneurial woman with ADHD, cannot afford to go with the default yes, which is what I call this concept in my coaching business. The default yes will fuck you up. We have to be aware that we're always going to feel the urge to say yes. Anytime somebody asks you, be on their summit, ask you to volunteer to do whatever for them. And because if we keep saying yes to things, we're saying no to ourselves. We're saying no to the opportunity cost of whatever the hell else we could be doing. We're saying no to thinking for ourselves about what we want. Learning to just hit the pause button. And I had to get so serious about this that I never say yes to anything at the moment that it's asked. And I mean anything. I have little scripts that I've memorized. I use different ones depending on the situation, whether it's social, professional, financial, whatever. I do not give an answer to anything other than if someone says, do you have the time? Yeah, then I'll go ahead and just give them the time. But I won't say yes and then not say anything else, because I learned that it's not time management that we need most. It's energy management and obligation management. And once I've said yes, I feel like I have to follow through. And then I'm overcommitted, overextended, overwhelmed, stressed out, resentful, and not getting to the most important stuff. The default yes has to go. Just say no or hit the pause button.
I like the way you said that. The way I phrase that is you have one fuck left to give, use it wisely. So I pass these out to people and I tell them there are things you have to give a fuck about. I have these handfuls that I have to. This over here, it ain't my fuck to give. So I pass these out and I tell people, use this wisely. Use it.
That's blinged out, isn't it?
This one is not. I haven't blinged them out. I do bling out lots of stuff.
Ooh, damn. I like that.
Well, those are just my nails.
I got distracted.
But no, you're right. So when it comes to saying yes, I tell people, if your answer isn't hell yes, it needs to be fuck no.
Yeah.
You're not getting an answer from me right now. Like I said, I have one fuck to give and it's for me. It needs to be used wisely because if you are pouring from an empty cup, you are doing everybody a disservice. So that is why I cannot stress this enough. You have one, use it very wisely.
One of my favorite mantras that I use in my business all the time, I always say 0 fucks. I could give a fuck about that thing, but if I give a fuck about that thing, it means I'm taking my fucks away from other things. And you have 0 fucks.
You got to manage your fucks wisely.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's super important to give yourself white space on your calendar. The principle of not having too many things on the page, but give yourself the white space because things are going to come up that you have to take care of. And you shouldn't start your week having a jar filled with pebbles. Essentially, you have nothing else that can go in there. So by allowing yourself that white space, you can put the rocks, the bigger things in the jar. And then as the week goes on, you kind of add these pebbles. And by the end of the week, your jar is full. You filled up however much time you said you were going to work. For me, it's all about staying accountable to what did I accomplish yesterday? What went well? What didn't go well, what lessons did I learn, as well as what am I going to accomplish today? And sometimes when you say, what are you going to accomplish today, doesn't match up with what you're going to say tomorrow that you actually did accomplish. And that's okay. Just like giving yourself that grace and space is being kind to yourself. That's where a lot of folks, neuro-spicy or otherwise, kind of go off the rails and need that guardrail, is just like stop overcommitting yourself to things, because you have to have space, because things are going to come up. It might be something as silly as like answering an email or checking your invoices or whatever other kind of admin task, answering a phone call. Those things take time. Start off with space to handle those things, really.
Yeah. One of the things that's helped is creating focus moments, because oftentimes if I have everything available to me, then I do nothing. So I do a few things. First off, I am a handwritten person. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. I forget who was talking earlier about the to-do list. I used to, when I was in high school, I worked for my parents. They had a candy store, and my mom would, in preparation to leave for the day, be like, okay, do this, this, and this. And I was like, write it down, Eileen. I love you, but like, write it down. And she'd be like, I'm not writing it down. And I'm like, if you don't write it down, it's not getting done, period.
That's the rule in my house.
Submit your order in writing.
Yep. You want it done, you write it down, I will get it done. So I am a paper planner person. I have my digital calendar, but I still carry around a paper planner, and I sit down and I call it my get shit done system. I take my year goal, I break it down into quarterly goals, I break it down into monthly goals, and then I break it down into what needs to be my focus this week in order for me to stay on track with where I'm going this month. Because everything always feels urgent and important, no matter what it is. And that helps me really be like, no, this is the urgent, important thing this week. And then based on that, what are you doing today? I also have an egg timer that sits on my desk. I use this for focus blocks and focus time. And then the other thing is that I have turned off all of my rings and dings, all of them. I don't get rings and dings. My computer is almost always on do not disturb. It can wait until later. You can leave a message. When I had my fashion label, I had all my dings on. And what I found, and I think Diann and I have talked about this, it takes my brain so much time to get back into the task at hand. That if I was cutting a pattern and I got a Facebook message and I'd go and be like, Facebook message, dopamine seeking, right? You know, ADHD shit. And then I would turn back around and have to go back to cutting a pattern. I'd have to take 5 minutes to reassess what I had done up until that point, to get back to where I was, to then re-continue the task. Like, such a time suck. It takes our brains so much time to get back on track after we've been distracted that I had to turn everything off. And there are some people in my life that don't like it. And unfortunately, I can't care.
Well. I mean, our relationship with time is probably one of the most fascinating things about having ADHD. And it's really hard to explain to someone else because it sounds like some absolute delusional nonsense. The first ADHD conference I went to, I think my heart stopped for just a second, because the person who was giving the presentation was talking about the concept of the time horizon. The time horizon for a neurotypical person is 12 to 16 weeks, which means for people who aren't like us, they can imagine in their mind events 12 to 16 weeks into the future and plan accordingly. It was all of a sudden, my heart stopped, my brain stopped, and I was like, and I realized 12 to 16 weeks, that's a semester of college. That's how long you have to put in for time off if you work for a big company. That's how far ahead of time you have to book travel so that you don't pay up the wazoo. I literally turned to the woman next to me and I'm like, well, fuck me. I think mine's like 12 to 16 minutes. And all of a sudden I realized why I never got anything done on time, why I wrote term papers the night before they were due, whether they were 5 pages or 50 pages, why I got parking tickets and all that stuff, because I always had as much time as I needed. And the term time blindness is very offensive to me. I've decided to call it time optimism, because in my world, I have enough time for everything that I want to do, even though that's not the world anyone else lives in.
That's funny.
I know.
I still have a parking ticket I need to pay. Thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'll put it on the list.
Yeah, we know
It
about the
was a
list.
super interesting. I feel like I'm in this kind of juxtaposition of the entire situation because I used to not manage my own time. I was very time optimistic myself. I like that term. But when I got put in the role of managing all of the projects for the company and making sure that all of the time was allotted and having to do that 12 to 16 week planning, it was interesting because I had to hone this skill set very hard and all of a sudden make sure there was the white space and make sure that my team of designers wasn't going to kill me, basically. Because I didn't want to overload them. That was a very pivotal moment where it was like, okay, I have to really pay attention to this because now my choices in time and time optimism are now greatly affecting a group of people. And that's a big responsibility. And I want them to be able to do their best work because they're fantastic at it. But if I overload them and say, yeah, we're going to do 12 projects in 10 days, that's not going to work for them or for me at the end of the day either. I look back and it's one of the things that I feel very proud of all of our evolution and figuring out that like we've been gifted something really great and turning the perspective on what has been perceived as a lack of skills, turning the table on it and realizing, oh no, I could really do fantastic things with this. I can actually stop the craft when I think it looks good instead of adding more glitter to it, more bling, whatever. I don't have to overdo everything. I can control myself.
I love hearing
That
that you were able to learn that set of skills because your role is basically
Yeah.
executive functions. What you do for other people is you provide the executive functions. And even though you didn't come with that package, you acquired
No.
it aftermarket and you're doing
Yeah.
just fine. I hope
I
that that's hopeful because
yeah.
people say, oh, I don't have the executive functions. You can buy them or you can hire them. Like it's okay,
Yeah.
really.
I don't do anything now that I think I ever thought I was going to be doing. Like I'm doing compliance copywriting. I'm giving people those executive skills to do through the day. I never thought I was going to do it. But once I accepted all of my ADHD fun, it's amazing where the road takes you.
I love what you were just talking about, Courtney. And I would love for each of us to end on what do you think has been the unexpected surprise or the unexpected benefit of having ADHD? Because we've talked a lot about it's seen as a detriment or it's perceived as a detriment or we've all gotten fired or let go from it. Let's talk about what's the flip side of that coin. What has ADHD blessed your life and business with?
I would say it is my outlook and my appreciation for all of the little things. I have a very blessed life. Never did I imagine that I would sit here and watch my goats play and my ducks flip upside down, living their best life splashing, or my chickens in their dirt baths. And those are my absolute favorite things because it takes me out of the need to produce and be on to just sit back and enjoy the natural gifts and chickens just taking a dirt bath. It sounds so silly, but it is my absolute favorite thing. That and all of the great ideas. For a long time when I was younger, I wasn't diagnosed till I was 30, even though my nickname was Squirrel and Sidetrack and Half-Ass Eden Jackson. Those were my nicknames. And it never occurred to me that I had ADHD, even though now it's very obvious. But I thought I was stupid. And I've learned the complete opposite. I'm not stupid at all in the most humble way. I know a thing or two about a thing or two. And I'm also aware of how much I don't know. The gratitude I've gotten and the thinking outside the box. Like I said, the kryptonite and the superpower at the same time. The intuition to have a hunch on things and just know some things a little sooner than others. I like that.
One of the things I'm burdened by with my ADHD brain is more brilliant frickin' ideas than I have enough years left on this planet to implement. And while my brain is constantly, my strength finder number 2 is ideation, and that is no lie. I'm constantly coming up with one good idea after the next. And while it's almost impossible for me to pick a winner because I want to put every horse in the race, when I'm working with someone else who is like-minded and like-brained, I could reach into that tangled mess of spaghetti of all their ideas and say, that one right there, and this is what we're going to do with it. That is absolutely delightful. And it always blows people's hair back because they're like, I got a brain like yours, but how did you even do that? And it's so fun. That's special.
I love
and
that.
that's a gift of ADHD for fuck sure.
I think when you're able to accept the things that you always saw as like your coping strategies and like turn those coping strategies into your business, essentially, how amazing is that, that you're finally getting rewarded on the things that you had to do differently. You had to figure out for yourself so that you stayed the all-star favorite student throughout the years. When you're finally able to turn coping strategies into something that's marketable, how cool is that? Like, I think that's something that it's amazing, truly.
That's my benefit of how my brain works, is that working holistically on people's businesses, being able to see how the lead gen and the revenue streams and the marketing and the messaging and the sales process and the visibility strategy and like all of these like seemingly different, there's so many people that teach all of these things separately. And I'm like, no. If they're not all working together as an ecosystem and they're not all aligned and feeding each other and back and forth and hand in hand, then it doesn't work. That's my superpower of ADHD, is being able to see all of these different elements concurrently at the same time. And then my brain snapping them into place and saying, this fits with this one like this, and this one works with that one like this. And this lead gen strategy is going to drive people through this funnel to get to this revenue stream, to get to the sales process, to like da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It just, I never saw this as a strength, and I just assumed everyone's brains work this way. But when someone gives me a vision, I can almost instantly work backwards and very quickly construct a strategy for them within under an hour. Usually I do it on a sales call, and I have to take a lot of notes because my brain moves so quickly that then if they hire me, I forget what we talked about on the sales call. And then, it's like a thing, right? But got my bumpers, got to take notes on sales calls. That's the hidden benefit for me, is I never sought out to be a business strategist. I joke now, though, my grandmother is actually the one that got me into puzzles. And I joke now that I do puzzles all day, every day. That's it. That's how my brain works with business and with clients, and all those different little elements are like pieces of the puzzle to me that I then get to figure out how to put together into a cohesive picture. And that is my ADHD brain. And as Diann would say, that's what makes each and every one of us absolutely exceptional in the world.
What makes you different makes you special. Don't ever forget it. You're not a freak. You are a unique individual who is uniquely qualified to do something magical in the world.
They only make one you for a reason.
Yeah.
The best you can do is, don't do her a disservice.
That was the whole reason I wanted to have this. There's so many things out there that are like, unless you're doing business like this, you're doing it wrong. Or you have to follow these 5 steps in order to have a successful business. And none of us have fit into that. I'm very much like, the second someone says a proven system, I'm like, really? Rhyme me.
Right. I'm sure I could mess this
Prove
up.
it.
Yeah, prove it, right? For anyone listening, my encouragement would be figure out how your brain works and work with it. Someone said this earlier too. Don't make yourself bad and wrong. The longer you're making yourself bad and wrong and trying to operate your business from shoulds, it's going to be a really long, hard path. Any last thoughts for anyone that might be in this process of trying to figure out how to make their business fit their brain?
Yes, I have 2 huge recommendations. ADHD 2.0 by Dr.
Ned Hallowell.
I cannot recommend that book enough. If you decide you would like to do medication, I recommend that you have your doctor do a gene site test. That way it takes the guessing game out of which medications will work. You swab your mouth, you send it in, they send you back, hey, you know what? This works, this is not going to. Instead of unnecessary suffering, oh, well, this one might work. No, just get it out of the way. It's like $300. You can apply for a financial assistant, make it $100, but that $100 will give you the answers to what will and will not work for you when it comes to medications. Learn every single thing you can about ADHD, because all of the things that I found were just who I was and how I operated. Now it just, well, that makes sense. Now I realize why I operate like this, or why this and this works. And know your strengths and also your weaknesses, and delegate that to somebody else. You don't have to do this on your own, and it's a silly thing to do so.
Installing radical self-acceptance, self-awareness, especially if you are later in life diagnosed, can be dangerous.
Yes, I agree.
Because it can actually make you not only feel worse about yourself, because now you're 40, 50, 60, and you're just now finding out the grief, the missed opportunity, the suffering from that. So I think what has to come first for me and for the people that I work with is install radical self-acceptance acceptance. So you create safety to then learn everything you can about ADHD and more importantly about your ADHD, because we're all different.
Yes. I
I
like
think
that.
talk about it. It's so valuable to find people who are on a similar journey and to talk about it, not so much to wallow and commiserate, but just learn from others and strategies that have worked for them. Because maybe I don't do the same exact thing Eden does, but I riff off of what she's doing and I have a different flavor of ice cream. Opening that conversation, and it makes you feel very vulnerable because this is something that you've probably hidden your whole life. And opening up and talking about it, it's amazing the solutions and great ideas that can be actionable once you open yourself up to that conversation. So find people you trust and talk, share.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Let's go around one more time and say your name and where people can find you as well.
Eden Jackson. You can find me on edenjackson.com. Find me on Instagram under hypequeen.ej. Facebook under Eden Jackson if you're into goats.
I saw a goat video on your Instagram yesterday and big fan.
Listen, they're such sweet babies, but they are Jen Cicero in You're Badass at Making Money refers to goats. And as I'm listening to this book, I'm like, she's talking about Steve. Goats wake up every day with the intention, what shall I fuck up today? That is how you need to be about your life. What we gonna fuck up today? Let's do this. Come here and do it with a purpose. And that's what Steve does. Steve is very dedicated to the cause.
What can we all learn from Steve? I feel like that's an episode in and of itself.
Next episode, what can we learn from Steve?
Seriously.
I'm Courtney Sander, and you can find me at expertjournalist.llc on the internet. And then on Instagram, it's the.expert.generalist. And I post the fun stuff there. And occasionally I post on LinkedIn too. But LinkedIn is kind of a place for normies. So Instagram is where I love to hang out.
I am Diann Wingert of Diann Wingert Coaching and the newly rebranded ADHD-ish podcast. And I am definitely not a normie, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
I'm Bree Seeley. You can find the Big Goal Energy podcast on Instagram at big.goal.energy now. You can find me at breeseeley.com. Thank you all so much for joining us. This was such a beautiful conversation, and I truly hope that if you are a little neuro-spicy, you found some radical self-acceptance in it, that you found some tips, some tricks, and by all means, feel free to reach out to any of us about your ADHD journey. All of us would be more than happy to share more resources with you. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Big Goal Energy. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Big Goal Energy. We trust that it fueled your ambition and made you feel seen. We are a community of ambitious female entrepreneurs like you. Come join us in the Big Goal Energy community by visiting breeseeley.com/community. In the meantime, send your questions for us to cover in the episodes to info@breeseeley.com. Together, we'll turn your audacious dreams into remarkable achievements. Cheers to defying reality. See you on the next episode.